Welcome to the Nanyang Business School podcast. I'm Kritika Rai, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you with us as we dive into the ideas, insights, and stories that make the NBS community thrive. Whether you're interested in industry trends, curious to know more about our faculty, or just looking for fresh perspectives, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the NBS experience, where learning goes beyond the classroom. As we dive into the dynamic world of data analytics with our esteemed guest, Professor Goh Kim Huat. He is the Associate Dean of Nanyang Business School Graduate Studies, having won many teaching excellence awards, including Double Award of the Teacher of Year 2024. Professor Goh is an expert in data analytics and has consulted with many organizations in both public as well as private sectors. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
In this episode, we'll be exploring the transformative power of data analytics across industries, as also the skills required in today's job market. So to get this rolling, Professor, I would want to ask first very thing that what is the most exceptional, or I would say unconventional use of data analytics that you've come across, and something that really made you think?
Okay, I think that's a very interesting question. Right? When you talk about unconventional, for me, because I live, breathe data all the time, very few examples is actually unconventional to me, right? Yeah. But having said that, right, if you look at some of, because we get to interact with a lot of individuals, MBA students, PMBA students, and so on, I think in one conversation I had very recently, something interesting came up, right? And it was this individual, they were doing trading, right? They were doing commodities trading, and for sugar specifically. And demand of sugar is pretty much stable, right? But if you're trading sugar, you want to know the price of sugar prices and so on and so forth, then it has to be driven by the supply of sugar, right? And how do you sort of estimate the supply of sugar? And this individual told me that they're using satellite photos and actually monitoring how sugar cane is growing in different parts of the world, and using that and trying to estimate how the supply of sugar actually affects the price of sugar. Right? I mean, to me, that was really interesting and fascinating. But of course, over the years, satellite photos has been used in many different areas, right? And this is just another application. Right?
This reminds me of the classroom discussion that we had once. Of, you had asked us of how do we collect data apart from the surveys, and we all had these random answers. Yes. And then you suddenly break out, it's the satellite photos.
Yes.
But
yeah, so the idea about data collection, I mean, if you look at it, data is just information that we are seeing in the environment, right? Many organizations, right, depending on their ability to collect, the ability to store, right, could change the equilibrium, right, across things in organizations. And I think what has happened in the last 2 decades is that the cost of collection, right, the cost of storage has dropped tremendously, which allow organizations to think of new and innovative ways to collect such information. And of course, the use will be just depending on what the business intends and aims to achieve. That's how we sort of, and then of course you see applications from there.
How do you think that their contribution to analytics has reshaped our understanding? And since it's transforming, I would not say day in and out, but over the quarter, how we are looking at it, what do you think has their contribution been like, and how do you see the future of it?
Yes, I think that's a very interesting point. You talk about Nobel Prize, right? If you look at the Nobel Prize, which was established so many years ago, has always been traditionally awarded to the basic sciences, in chemistry, physics, and so on and so forth, right? Okay. And this year, interestingly, chemistry and physics, right? These are age-old disciplines. Right. You have two groups of individuals, right? Which are about computing and data science. Yeah. Historically, the highest award you can get in any data science is the Turing Award, right? That's for computer science, right? And of course, today, if you look at the folks who got the Nobel Prize in physics, right, they invented neural networks, right? And for chemistry, essentially it's awarded to the team in Google, which created the AlphaFold, which was the technology behind the ability to sequence proteins, and that's how they got. And I think this is actually a very interesting moment in time, because we are also showing case to the world that basic sciences is in fact very much impacted by computational tools, techniques, knowledge, which you see in data science and in computer science. And of course, this is a big shift, right? And it's a big shift and acceptance of that set of knowledge, right, into the main fold of what constitute basic sciences. And I think this is interesting because as that progress over time, you start to see innovations in basic sciences will get into businesses and so on and so forth. And that's how typically knowledge is being created.
Right. That's a very interesting thing of how it's shifting.
Yeah.
So makes me question that what is therefore the youth that is getting into data analytics? How should their perception be like? Is it more about just numbers, or is it about the patterns, or
So I think that's an interesting point, because if one were to say, oh, the world is all about data, probably not. Probably not. I don't think that is going to be the case now, and it's not going to be the case in the near future as well. And if you're looking at the next generation of individuals who are coming into the workforce and being educated and whatnot, I think data will do play a very big role in the businesses and whatnot. But the question is, how do you train individuals to have the right set of mindset, the right set of skills and thinking, right? I think one of the things that I think is increasingly important, right, is the ability to be able to think and problem solve on your feet. Has been all the while been an important thing, but even more so now. If you look at Google, right, recently Google just announced that 25% of the programming tasks are now done by generative AI, right? And many of the jobs that we see historically that a computer science graduate, right, would say, hey, that's something I could do when I start out in my career. I think that has slowly been eroded. And I think that is actually a very big impact. And from the perspective of the youth, will be the issue that when you're graduating from university and getting into the workforce, historically, they'll be given relatively basic tasks and they can learn on the job, right? Universities do train individuals, but individuals and the workforce do train the folks who are actually in those various appointments and jobs, right? And that part of training is now slowly going away, right? Because machines are coming in, right? And then you start to question, okay, where does the human play over here? So the ability to problem solve I think is definitely something has to be there for sure. Having a very computational mindset, right? Not necessarily just programming, or programming is definitely a good thing to pick up, but having a computational mindset in things, I think that will also allow one to be able to understand, right, the core basics of whatever is being generated by any form of generative AI tool that we have. I think thirdly is able to work in teams. I think this is going to be challenging, right? Because very often individuals learn to work in teams, in organizations, come over time, right? Over years of experience, you start to interact with others. But now I think it's going to be brought forward, right? Much earlier into the workforce, right? Because the simple tasks that individuals are trained on the job is now slowly going away. Right? And I think that is potentially a big challenge for the next generation of individuals who are coming to the workforce that are being trained by universities.
Wow. So that's a very interesting take on how we are looking at, teams working together, and it's not just about individual, or also to the fact that machines are doing a lot of work than humans. But do you think that there requires a restructuring of education, of how we are teaching, or probably how students are learning about data or science, or probably analytics? Or because when you look at data analytics or when you look at data science, it's more of, it's an engineering field. But the classes that we've attended of yours, you've always said that, doesn't matter which background you come from. It's always about the patterns that you recognize and the critical thinking or problem solving approach that needs. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think definitely to a great extent, educational institutions, universities, and so on should definitely make some significant changes right along the way as we see things progress, right? Because as you are trying to educate the next generation of individuals, the issue is that how do you then balance core knowledge, right, with something that is being ready-made, like from generative AI and so on and so forth. I had this discussion with some of my colleagues who are teaching programming, right? And the purists will say, hey, in programming, you should not be using generative AI. You should train all the necessary, the nuts and bolts, right, that comes to programming. But if you sort of segue and look into the industry, individuals are using generative AI for programming tasks all the time, right? So the question is, how do you then sort of reconcile this difference? From educational standpoint, definitely you need to train the next group of the next generation of students with the core skills that's required. At the same time, also to highlight to them that these are also tools available out there which make life a lot much easier, right? Take for example, right? Folks who have done statistics long time ago, they will do regression, everything by hand. Just imagine, calculate your regression all by hand, which is absolutely ridiculous today. No one would do it anymore, right? You invert the matrices and so on and so forth. Today, you use the software. Does it mean that you're less learned? Probably not, right? It sort of allows the individual to challenge themselves to say, hey, how can we then apply this tool that we have to solve problems that we see in organizations? Right. So, which brings me to the second part. I think universities would then have to be able to provide the students, right, in addition to the core foundational knowledge that you see, the ability to apply, right, all the tools that we have and try to solve problems in a very innovative way. So that set of innovative thinking itself has to be sort of developed over time through formal training, and of course through more applied kind of projects that the students get engaged into. I think that hopefully universities are shifting towards that. Definitely NTU, we are looking into that for a great extent, because just hoping that generative AI does not impact jobs is not going to be a feasible path. Even how it affects education, I think it's going to be significant in the years to come.
What's been your most fun moment in the class, if I can ask that?
The fun moment in the class, I think fun is a relative word. Over time, different sets of participants, you said it's all grow into the different groups. I think in the past, the fun group is typically the MBA students, right? You guys talk a lot, right?
Yay.
A lot of conversation, that's great. Right. I think increasingly in the last couple of years, the EMBA students, which are a lot much more senior, right, with more than 20 years of work experience, they can also be very fun as well, right? I think this is usually typically the senior executives. When you start interact with them, you get to sort of learn a lot from them as well. There's this saying, in the classroom, right, the learning is actually multi-directional, right? So the instructors we also learn from the participants, like the example I gave you about the sugar and so on, right? That's from one of the participants. They are commodity traders, right? And it's impossible for any single person to have knowledge that's so vast that can carry, sort of cover everything under the sun, right? So I think that ability to converse and interact, I think that's the fun part.
A very interesting thing that I came across was trading analytics. Mm-hmm. Would you want to kind of touch upon that? Because that's not really common to everyone. Mm-hmm. But would you want to shed some light on that?
Trading analytics, yes.
How is it in today's market? Because a lot of people who are, they'll be joining college, or probably they'll be joining work. What is the advice that you would want to give? Because it's kind of not a new topic, but not many people know that.
Yes, right. Okay. Over the years, I discovered trading analytics is something that, because when we build tools, specifically today, I build tools largely for the clinical setting, where we do prediction for ailments and whatnot. We can get very high level accuracy, which is almost equivalent to that of an actual physician, right? And I always get that question. Someone will come by and ask me, can you do something similar for the trading sphere, the trading arena, right? Can we make money with analytics? The short answer is yes, but it's a lot much more difficult than that in the financial sector for one reason. It's not about the technique, it's about human behavior. See, when I'm trying to predict, say, for example, if a person is going to have a particular disease, right? That prediction is independent and it does not impact that person's underlying condition. That means my prediction is just someone from the outside looking into it. But supposedly if I'm trying to predict if this instrument or this commodity or this share price is going to go up, right? That prediction affects individual behavior. And at the same time, others are also doing the same. Right? And when you have multiple individuals trying to do the same task with different level of efficacy, different level of accuracy, it changes the price of the instrument. So therefore, prediction for trading, it's very difficult because it's comparative in nature. Whereas if you're predicting, say, for example, a clinical condition, it's not comparative in nature. You could be predicting if this guy get diabetes. I could be predicting if this person is going to get diabetes. But our prediction will not affect his outcome of getting diabetes. So which makes it a lot much more challenging. So it's not into the technique, but also into the nature of that problem itself.
That also kind of reminds me of data is a boon to companies, to continents, understanding what's happening. It is also having its negatives. Right? We're talking about how data is being misused or mishandled. And, the data security comes into the picture. What's your intake on that?
I think the interesting thing about definitely when you look at anything that is interesting out there, there's always typically a downside to it.
I'm talking about the scandals.
The scandals? Yeah, of course.
That are happening.
Misinformation and whatnot, right? Okay, definitely there will be individuals who try to say, hey, can we use, say, for example, an LLM machine, right, to sort of generate truths or half-truths, right, to shape behavior. I think that is one big problem because unlike, say, for example, search engines and whatnot, where sometimes we can search the source of the information and say whether is it right or wrong. Some generative AI tools like LLM do not give the user the ability to sort of fact check in a way to see what is your source and so on and so forth, right? So therefore, that's definitely open to misuse in that sense. Privacy is of course going to be a big issue. I think globally, many countries are also looking into how do you sort of manage privacy, right? But of course, then comes the problem when you start to regulate something, right? Regulation is good in the sense that it protects, it sets certain guardrails, but regulation also stifles creativity and so on, right? And the question is, how do we balance that? Find balance between creativity and against that of regulation. Around the world, I can safely say many individuals are trying to solve that problem. There is no simple solution to that problem, right? I don't think the solution is going to be a binary one, right? But it's somewhere going to be between the two extremes, right? Misinformation, I think that's interesting, right? Because when you look at misinformation, I always believe that if misinformation becomes too high a level, then essentially you have a potentially a failure of markets, right? Where nothing else might appear to be true, right? For that matter, and also, of course, then that would also seriously undermine, right, the application of many of those tools that we are trying to generate for that matter.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a professor, as you know, you've been in this field, you belong to this field. What's been your biggest fear of, data as a whole?
I think the last 20 years, right, the growth of data has been exponential, not in terms of just the storage, but the processing and whatnot and so on, right? And that has sort of created many potentially, I think you probably have read in popular press and so on, potential disparity, right, between those who have and those who have not. There's a very big argument, like if you look at any economy for that matter, right, most economy in production, you need three things to sort of grow a country for that matter. You need labor, you need capital, and of course you need natural resources, and typically in some countries it's just the availability of land and space, right? And today what you are seeing is that many organized countries, right, with AI and whatnot, with the technology, is potentially trying to create some punctuation within economies around the world, right? If you look at countries with capital, typically capital is something that could create great it's very sticky. Capital don't sort of move real quickly, right? And the other challenge that we can see is that very slowly, there are some folks out there are saying that AI is like capital right now, right? And the haves and the have-nots would be able to create great disparity across societies, across countries, and I think that can be a challenging point from the perspective of societies as well as countries. I think it is something that's evolving, right? I think many countries are also trying to make sure that they can catch up with that, and hopefully over time things will be a much better world in a sense, where you have the necessary factors of production for economies.
Do you think that Gen AI is the leading? Of course, it's leading right now, but is it going to go on in the coming future? At short term, maybe 3 to 5 years, or and because of this, like other companies are kind of coming up with their own tools that should be in comparison to,
Yep. I think generative AI itself is just a whole family of technologies that we see, right? I think what has happened is that historically, right, when you look at AI and analytics in general, we are using historical data to make some form of predictions and some form of explanations and so on and so forth. But generative AI is also creating new data for that matter, right? We don't create so much of information, right, historically, if you're looking at the tools that we have. I think that is potentially a game changer, right? Companies are also coming up with tools and so on. You're probably going to see a lot of development in this particular area. But of course, then again, the question comes with other problems. There are now questions, right? Whether when the machine is generating information and it's training off those information, you potentially have an inbreeding, right? So you are training on data that was generated, right? How you know is actually correct, right? So there are also challenges that we see over there, right? Over time, I guess this tool will probably evolve into products and services, right? In what form? Not sure at this point in time, right? Perhaps, right? And of course, you can see them when you start to see them embedding into, say, for example, tools, services, and whatnot. I think this is the point whereby you tend to see something really interesting that will sort of evolve. It's like, for example, look at steam engines, right? Or rather the steam power, right? When steam power was invented, it was discovered rather, not invented, right? So it was something, right? But when you start to put steam into, say, engines and turbines and so on and so forth, then then it creates other users, right? And again, it's very hard for one to tell, right? Where can you sort of deploy this? There are also success stories as well as failures. Right? I think one very common failure a couple of months back was McDonald's had to pull out generative AI when you do the ordering, right? When through the drive-through where they're putting in orders which are absolutely spurious, right? I mean, these are initial hiccups, right? But eventually, I think the technology would perhaps iron out those kinks, and then you start to see more great applications of it.
Right. Right. That's interesting.
At the same time, I think you can also see growth of new industries as a result of it. I can think of two. At least I heard of two, right? One is actually, I'm not sure you could remember in one of the class that we talked about, was that you have a lot of unstructured data that's unlabeled, right? Yeah. So today, there are companies out there, right, that are trying to say, hey, can we use generative AI to label data? Right. There are many companies who are trying to do that. They try to get lots of funding, right, in order to do the auto-labeling activities. And if you can do that, that opens up a large amount of data sets which is untouched today, right? That's one example. There are also industries that out there is trying to negate the effects of generative AI. Because, for example, you have when generative AI is trained on many images, like, for example, you're in creative industry, right? And you ask Gen AI to say, hey, generate a picture of, say, a dog or a cat or whatsoever. The only way this can be done is that the technology is going out there and capturing all these images of dogs and cats and trying to mash them together. And that creates copyright issues, right? Individuals who are drawing, the creative artists who have drawn the pictures of dogs and cats might hate that for sure, right? So there are technologies out there that can prevent generative AI from capturing these images today, right? There are firms that will poison images. Those images look okay, look fine to the human eye, but it will not look fine to a machine. So these are new industries, companies that sort of were created as a result of the kind of technologies that we have.
But do you think that these are well equipped? Because, I mean, if we just go towards how government is using or how it's being used in the political environment today, of how data mining is happening, and then, you trying to make sure that the right news is going to the people.
Yes, correct.
Although it's being caught a little later.
Yes, correct.
But do you think these industries have enough potential to match the speed of the misinformation that is being passed?
Yes, I think that's a very, very tough question to be asked. So, as in, can we use that to fact check? Can you use? I mean, from a technical standpoint, yes, right. Definitely there will be abilities to do that. But I think it speaks to another issue, is that, if you're using machines to fact check, right? How do you know the machines are right in the first place? Right? So it becomes the issue about whether to individuals or to humans actually believe in this kind of information that's being portrayed. And again, which goes back to the very first point about misinformation, right? If misinformation hit a certain level, right, maybe misinformation might not be so bad of an issue because no one really trusts too much about the information that you get in the very first place, right? Right? If you see a picture, you see an image that you say, hey, this does not sound right. But the very fact is, if all images don't look right to you, then your trust for images in general would have come down. And then that would sort of result in situations whereby maybe a picture which is not exactly accurate, portraying the truth, might get, in general, lower truth because just that our humans have lower trust in general to any information that we see. And that would be a scary point to be in, at some point, if we ever hit that.
So now we are more on the trust, how much trust people have. So you mentioned about the front-end roles today in business environment. Why is human-centric role getting more critical in today's business environment?
Yeah, sure. So if you look at data science, data analytics in general, right, there are essentially three parts to this, right? You have a human driving it, the human architect, which I used to use the term all the time in my classes. You have a back-end data analytics guys. These are guys who are in charge of building the databases, storing the data, extracting them when you need them, and so on. And then you got the front-end analytics folks who actually take the data and build models around that. Traditionally, it has been this cycle, but this cycle or this structure is again constantly challenged with all the tools that we have, right? Especially with the generative AI tools that we are seeing today, right? The back-end analytics and, of course, part of the model building is largely being eroded because the tools we have today, the generative AI tools we have today, are able to carry on or rather execute those tools or those tasks very much more efficiently, right, compared to a typical human. As a result, then comes the question is that what is left for the human to do, right? And eventually then comes to the point whereby if you go back to the first principle whereby you need to have individuals to think of what are the problems that we want to solve in the very first place. These are the architects of the solution. Then that potentially has to be human. Hopefully that is human. If that is taken by machine, then probably the human will have almost no role to play in this entire scheme of things. So the front end role that the human has is to be able to understand the context that we want, the problems that we need to solve, formulate the key problem statements, and use those tools to augment, to help, to develop the kind of solutions that we need. So the front end part is still very, very definitely important. But of course, it does not mean that the back end analytics is no longer important. But I would say this set of this set of tasks rather, is going to be quite significantly augmented and impacted by the kind of tools that we have that just came out in the last 2 years.
So if we are having the need of front end roles, then we are also having, on the contrary, the layoffs that are happening in tech firms, especially.
Yes.
It's something that, in top 3 or top 4 firms that we have.
For sure.
So how does this go if we really require front-end roles and at the same time they're being laid out?
Yeah. So many of the layoffs that we are seeing, right, typically come from the roles which are more of the back-end part of things. You still need the business development folks, right? Your AI systems is not going to generate sales leads for you. They can potentially generate sales leads from a Excel table point of view or table. These are potential people you should contact, but you still need the human to sort of execute that. So those front end roles, right, that we are seeing, they will still stay, right? But those the tech jobs that you are seeing that are being laid off are largely more from the level of coding, certain aspects of the systems that we are trying to build, right? So therefore, we are seeing a lot of those displacement over there. But I believe humans are very adaptive, right? Just like machines, AI, and they will start to adapt and say, hey, let's try to move towards an area where value is required, right, from the human labor force, and that's hopefully how things all pan out, right? I think we are in the early stages of this entire evolution, right? And definitely there will be some punctuation. So because you look at any piece of technology, disruption usually comes in at the process level first, right? Tasks, processes. And after that, it becomes products and services, right? And that it becomes and eventually at industries, right? So of course, there's this term that was coined years ago, right? Because it's called technological unemployment, right? Because of some piece of technology, certain groups of people get sort of washed out, right, of the entire employment chain. But then there you will definitely have another group of folks who come in and say, oh, you know what? In the short run, yes, that's going to happen, but in the long run, things will sort of solve itself, right? Because you create new products and services and so on and so forth. The unfortunate fact is that for industries and cycles, they live on long runs. While humans, we live on the short runs, right? The average life of a human is relatively much shorter, right? A typical generation is only 30 years, right? So I think the education institutes, I think it goes back to the question that we had earlier. Education institutes are individuals who have a bigger role to play to be able to adapt and sort of move fast, right, in these trends, right? Because jobs are relatively short run, and we individuals need their paychecks, right? And if you tell them in the long run things will sort of even out itself, it's not going to help, right? For that matter,
right? So we know you as a professor, right? We also know you as an individual of how much we've heard that how you're really fun and you have this your own side of sarcastic, humorous nature. What really made you choose a field like data analytics or become a professor for that matter?
Okay, that's an interesting question. First thing, thanks for feeling that I'm fun. Because fun is a subjective thing. How I came into this, I'm a naturally introvert, right? So most...
We don't feel that in classes.
Okay, that's a different conversation for a different time, right? So I'm an introvert, right? So I love computation, right? So back in the days when I was doing my undergraduate studies, I discovered that I can work very, very hard for the non-quantitative subjects. I do okay for them, but I don't really study for any of the quantitative subjects, and I do exceptionally well for them. So when I graduated from college, from university, I felt that I should do something that I can do with the least amount of effort. Right?
That's interesting.
So that's why I sort of gravitate towards this. Back in those days, right, data science wasn't even a thing. I don't think that term even exists in the first place, right? The first batch of folks who do data science and whatnot tend to be statisticians, right? Applied econometricians, and so on and so forth, right? Sometimes mathematicians, applied mathematicians, right? So that's how I sort of gravitate towards that. And I think one thing led to another. I always wished to say that, I have foresight that 20 years later, this is going to be a big thing, right? But it wasn't the fact, right? It just happens that, it's something that I like to do for a very long time. And I just sort of stumbled upon it, right?
Wow.
I hope I have a more insightful, perceptive kind of answer, but this is what it is, right?
Wow. So what do you do in your pastime, like if you're not...
Pastime? I exercise.
Wow.
I try to sleep. I don't drink coffee.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I don't drink coffee. Yeah, so I personally don't drink coffee. So I need to have my sleep. I think sleep is very important. It's usually one of the most underrated thing. Right? Folks will always say, "Oh, I did not sleep, therefore I look like I'm doing a lot in life." But always remember, you got to sleep well.
Right.
You need to work hard. And of course, you need to enjoy what you're doing. I think that's actually very important. Right? And of course, eat healthy and so on. Now sounds like a nutritional.
But you also cook well.
Yeah, I cook okay. I mean, earlier I've mentioned I cook okay. You won't have food poisoning. You wouldn't complain the food is bad, but definitely not to the level where it's like a Michelin restaurant there, and that's not anywhere close, right? My father, my dad he used to be a chef, right?
Oh, wow.
So he cooks very well. So in my family, he has very high standards of cooking, right? And I think there's a great difference between cooking for your family, right, versus cooking for a living. Right? Because if individuals cook for a living, they cook with speed and accuracy.
So what's the common data myth that people misunderstood, as per you?
Okay. I think the most common misconception about data analytics is that it must be very quantitative. I think that's the most common problem that most individuals face. At the same time, I also observe that data means different things to different people, right? And there's no one clear definition of it, right? Because very often how we see data, so it sort of relies on what we have in our prior experiences and so on and so forth. So that's potentially, these are the few most common misconception, because at the end of the day, data is not necessarily just a quantitative subject, right? It's a subject that sort of blends both quantitative understanding as well as qualitative interpretation, which I think is absolutely critical.
Since we're coming to the end of the podcast, what's your one piece of advice to the students who are, who will be getting into this field or probably intending to get into this field but have certain concerns? What would you want to tell them?
I think it's always important to have a very open mind towards what data is. As I mentioned earlier in one of your questions, one of the biggest misconception is to think that data is highly quantitative and individuals with very strong computational mind can do it, right? I think if you embrace this entire topic with open mind, there are definitely enough jobs, right, that could cover this space, right, over a spectrum of roles. And I think that's something that one should go in well aware, right, as opposed to, it's just all about programming. Programming is one part, it's not the only part.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us at NBS Podcast. See you in the next episode.